I recently did a video answering the question, does a VPN really protect privacy? We received lots of comments on this, and I read them. So I thought it would be a good idea to do a follow-up video and correct one error that I made and clarify some other points. A lot of people asked a lot of good questions, so let's cover those. Just to be clear, in this video, I'm going to focus strictly on personal VPNs, whereas the original video also touched on corporate VPNs. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so here goes. Let's start off with a quick review of what a VPN is, a virtual private network. And then in that, I'll include the correction that I need to make with my previous description. So what happens is we've got a user here with a browser wants to hit a website. So they send their information over. Typically, most websites these days do this protocol called HTTPS. If you see the S, then it's supposed to mean secure, meaning the information is encrypted. So it's encrypted here and decrypted on this side. So what we're trying to guard against with that is that as your information goes across the internet, not everyone on the internet can see what your traffic is. So that's the idea with HTTPS. And that's particularly important if you're sending passwords and things like that. You wouldn't want those being exposed. But it doesn't guard against everything. For instance, you've got an internet service provider who gave you this IP in the first place and gave you an on-ramp to the internet. They will still be able to see your traffic. They will be able to see the IP address that you're going to and how often you go there. So if that's a concern, then you might want an additional level of privacy. Now, why would you care about the ISP? Well, your ISP could have a data breach, and if they did, then all the records that they've kept about your web surfing habits could become public information, and maybe you don't want that. It could also be the case that through a court order, law enforcement contacts the ISP and say, we want to see all the web traffic that this person has done. Well, then maybe you don't want that to be the case. So if you decide that you would rather not do that, then you can do that. ISPs also might use your information and sell that. So they're using your web traffic as a way to market information about you to others, and therefore they profit, and maybe you don't want them to do that. So there's a number of different reasons why you don't necessarily want your ISP knowing everywhere you go all the time. And if that's the case, that's when you would bring in a virtual private network. Here we have a separate provider, and what we're going to do in this case is we're going to actually set up a separate session. So this user, and I'm showing this as a pipe or a tunnel, because we're going to tunnel this. We're going to install a special client here, piece of software that they're going to use. And with that client, they're going to encrypt all the information that goes out of that client. And where it all goes is it all goes right here. So, and here, I'm going to have a decryption point where all the information gets decrypted. So it can travel across this public network, but people won't be able to see what it is, just like with HTTPS. The difference is the ISP doesn't see where you're going. All they see is you keep going to this VPN provider again and again and again. So they're basically blinded to what's happening here. Now what happens is you're still running an HTTP session. You're going to run it directly through the VPN provider. And this is the part I need to correct, because in the previous video, I talked about the VPN provider could also set up a separate session and encrypt that information with a separate tunnel. They could, and that's basically a proxy configuration. Most of them don't do that, so I don't want to be misleading. And let's show a more accurate, more commonplace example of this. So we still have the end-to-end encryption between the website and the user, which is all good, but now we have it so that the ISP is kind of taken out of the loop to a great extent. They just see everything going to one place, and then they don't see more. Now, what that means is, do you have anonymity? Well, no, not really, because this website, well, they know who you are. If you logged into them, then they know who you are. They also might set cookies in your browser that allow them to track your habits and where you're going. Do they know where you're coming from, your IP address? Well, no, because all they're going to see is the IP address for the VPN provider. For every time you come through, no matter where you happen to be, they're going to see the IP address of that. Do they know your geographic location? No, they're going to see whatever the geographic location of the VPN provider is. So that way you're getting some level of privacy protection also from the website itself by using the VPN. And how does all of that happen? Well, there's a thing to understand here. When you send information over the internet, there's a packet that you're going to send. And with one of those packets, it's going to look like this. We've got basically a portion that is known as the header and a portion that is known as the payload. And the payload is really all your data. That's the stuff you're sending to the website, or the website is sending back to you. That's the stuff that you really most care about. But up here in this header, we're going to include a lot of information. Most importantly is a source IP address and a destination IP address. So your source address would be you, the destination would be where you're trying to get to. That's going to be included in there. And that's the information that even if you have HTTPS turned on, that information is still exposed. So you're going to encrypt with HTTPS the payload. So that's all the sensitive information you might be sending to that web server, your passwords, all that kind of stuff. But if you're doing this scenario, your source address and destination address, along with a few other things like that, are still in the clear. They have to be in the clear, otherwise we wouldn't know how to route your traffic around. So by doing it this way, all of this information gets protected. Now, the ISP still sees a source and destination address. It's just what they see as a destination address is always this. And the source address is you, and of course they knew that anyway. So that's a key distinction, is looking at, now we've covered this correction so that we don't have a second tunnel, and now hopefully you understand the difference between the header and the payload in the packet, and which part is protected by HTTPS and which part is not. Another reason you might want to use a VPN is because it lets you bypass certain controls or restrictions. So if we've got some restrictions, what might these be? Well, one might be content restriction. So if you live in a country where there are rules on what you can see, limits on free speech, news reports you're allowed to access and not, things like that, someone might use a VPN to hide their address. Because one of the things that happens here also is geographical restrictions can be removed. Because if the VPN is the address that the website sees, and that VPN is in the safe zone, well, then you can basically pick a VPN provider to appear anywhere in the world. So if you need to appear that you're coming from a different country that doesn't have those restrictions, you pick a VPN provider that has a server in that area. And then that way the geographical content limitations, censorship, any sort of inspection of the content you're sending, again, will not be able to be easily seen. And then there may be, like I said, certain sites that could be blocked. It could be certain content that you've paid for, but you are not able to access that when you're outside of your home country, and you feel like maybe you still should. So a lot of people use them in that way. It's in some cases it's for privacy, some cases it's just for access. So another thing, and this is really the point of the previous video that I want to underline here again, is that a VPN is essentially a transfer of trust. It does not take away all privacy issues. We'll talk about anonymity a little more in a minute, but what it does is it transfers trust. Your VPN provider may in fact be keeping a log of all the traffic that comes in, just like your ISP might have been doing. So now, instead of relying on this database that the ISP is keeping, that's not going to see much of interest, all of the interesting stuff is going to be in this database. So now it depends on how much can I trust these guys? Are these guys ones who are going to turn this information over readily? Maybe they're compelled to by a court order, in which case they have to. Maybe they sell your information. You thought you were getting away from that with the ISP, but this VPN, by the way, if you're not paying for it, then you are the product, not the customer. So if you've got a free VPN, they are probably monetizing your data, and you think you are getting something that's more private. In fact, you're just concentrating all your information to one place where they can sell it or abuse your information. So it all depends, and these guys could also get hacked. So nobody's perfect. So you're transferring your trust from the ISP about some of this information to a VPN provider. And if they do a good job, then you have improved your privacy. If they don't do a good job, you haven't. So you may be wondering about this thing called Tor, the onion router. Some people asked about that in the comments, and you might say, well, why wouldn't I use that? What are the pros and cons? Let's take a look at that. First of all, what is Tor? Let's look at that a little bit. Well, with Tor, if we're the user here and the website we're trying to get to over here, so the same scenario, the user is going to route their traffic through a Tor node, a relay. And this particular node then will route their traffic to another relay node that is in the Tor network, which will then route it to yet another. And then ultimately, after it's done 3 hops, then it's going to send your information to the web server. So now I drew that in a different color because this information is actually not encrypted as part of the Tor network. Each one of these are encrypted connections. And the advantage to this is no single Tor node, if it were compromised, would know the whole story and be able to reconstruct everything. So you're basically splitting the responsibility up, and therefore you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. That's the thought. But notice again, this part is not protected. So you would need to use either maybe a HTTPS connection or something like that in order to secure that last bit of it. But let's take a look at a comparison of the two. So if we've got VPN, which we've been talking about in this video, and we've got Tor, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each of them? Well, in terms of protection from your ISP, well, they're both going to give you that. So you've got the ability now so that your ISP, if you're using a VPN or Tor, the ISP is just going to see you're entering the VPN or you're entering the Tor network. That's really all they're going to see. How about anonymity? Well, I mentioned earlier that the VPN gives you sort of anonymity, but not so much because it's not protecting all of the information all through the entire path. Tor is something that would be much stronger for anonymity, if that's what you're really after. And this is really the strong suit of Tor. This is where it's really going to have an advantage over a VPN, is it will do a much better job of maintaining your anonymity. Again, with the VPN provider knows who you are and could track you back. The Tor network would have a difficulty tracking you back because of all the hops it's gone through. Now, another thing though that we might look at is speed. Okay, this is why you may want to reconsider if you think a VPN would be the answer or Tor would be the answer. A VPN is relatively fast. Now, it's going to be slower than if you were just going directly to the website because it's adding an extra hop. You've got to traverse this server and you're going to encrypt your information. But what's not going to be good for Tor is this speed. It's got to go through 3 different hops with different encryptions. This, in fact, leads to the next one, and that's related to streaming. So if what you're doing is streaming, say, a video online, okay, a VPN could do a decent job of that. Tor, probably not. Not unless you like watching lots of buffering messages. Not going to be such a great thing for that. Another one to consider is simplicity. So how simple is this thing to deal with? Well, a VPN is relatively simple. It's not as simple as just going straight to the website, but you install the client software, you log into it, you turn the VPN on, and you pretty much set it and forget it in most cases. However, Tor is a much more complicated thing to deal with. I'm not even going to try to get into the details of how you set this up, but if you were trying to get to the dark web, you'd use a Tor browser, but if you're trying to get to the dark web, well, then you're going to know more details, presumably, before you try doing something like that. Another use case to consider, if you're on public Wi-Fi. In this case, if you're trying to protect, let's say you've gone to the coffee shop and you've connected into their Wi-Fi, and you want to make sure that the Wi-Fi in the coffee shop can't see all the places that you're going to. Well, a VPN could do a good job of that. If you were using Tor for that, yeah, it could do it, but this is really overkill. I mean, that's a lot of heavy lifting for a case like that. And then the last one I'm going to do here is a whistleblower. So if we've got someone who is, and a whistleblower is the idea that you're trying to tell the world about something but still maintain your privacy. You need to let the world know about some abuse that's happening in a company or in a country or something like that. So you're blowing the whistle on that. Well, whistleblowing, maybe not so much for a VPN. It's not going to protect everything. Again, the VPN could be audited, could be compelled to hand over the records, so maybe not the best case. This is where Tor is going to give you an advantage. So you can see there's pros and cons to each one of these technologies, and there's the right use case for one and the right set of use cases for the other. As you can see, once you go down the VPN rabbit hole, things aren't always what they seem. Do VPNs really protect privacy? Well, that's a definite maybe. It all depends on what you're trying to protect and who you're transferring your trust to. Just remember, if you aren't paying for it, you're the product, not the customer. That means a free VPN probably monetizing the info it gathers about you and your traffic. Just because you paid, though, doesn't necessarily mean it's better. So which VPN is best? Well, we don't do product reviews on this channel, so I'm not going to be telling you which one to use, but I will recommend that you check out the articles and videos across the internet, and there are many, from those who have done these reviews. Then decide which one is right for you.